Hey everybody, Shane from Shane's Books and Review, and I hope that you are having a wonderful day. Today we are going to be talking about For We Are Many by Dennis E. Taylor. And for those of you that saw the last video, you will know this is book 2 of the Bobiverse, so things are kind of coming together a little bit. There's one preface I want to give this, is sometimes it gets a little hard to keep track of all the different Bobs, so I apologize for that. But also, there's a lot of things that became advancements in this book as well, so it makes it easier for Bob to keep track himself. In the last video and a YouTube comment that I made, I had mentioned that to me, the personal relationships of Bob to the people, or as some of the Bobs refer to, ephemerals, are something that I've really been enjoying in this book. It's something I've been enjoying a lot in this series, and it's actually been kind of fun to watch. There is this issue with Bob being a disembodied individual. He meets the Deltons and kind of shepherds them a little bit in the first book, a lot in the second book, until finally their lead counsel gets tired of his shenanigans and tell him, "Nope, out you go." That would not be a fun situation, would it? Also, at the same time, humanity being moved from planet Earth to other places, he ends up meeting somebody that he starts to really get on with. But, again, he's this disembodied individual. Regardless of him being an AI, it doesn't change the fact that he does have feelings in the book as a character. I don't think that there's any person alive that could not relate to that situation that he was in. Now, as far as the storyline goes, in the first book we had this definitive A to B, being that he was going to be created and sent off to explore and to make himself bigger and send information back home. Well, in the second book, it's not really so clear what the definitive action is. There's multiple storylines happening in this one, where the first one, it was just 2 or 3. In this one, we have the Deltons being brought to an apex and then falling off. Bob has a personal relationship that develops with somebody as he's making stuff, which we'll get into more later, but that relationship falls off too, only towards the end. Then there seems to be a dissemination amongst the ranks, because originally I had mentioned something about analogs. Whenever you make an analog copy of something, if you go to a copy machine and you write "hi," and then make another copy of that "hi," by the time you get 6 or 7 deep in making copies of copies, eventually you're going to find things that are like artifacts on that page, being differences in between the original one and the one that you have in your hand. Sometimes it's a lack of information, sometimes there's other information that seems to just magically show up. And I kind of guessed in that first one that that might be a scenario that Bob would have to deal with, and I nailed it. Mainly because if you try to think about it in this way, a person's personality is completely definitive upon that person, what they have experienced, what they've done, etc. There are some things that are just ingrained. If I was born in 2 places at the same time and I had 2 different upbringings and I had 2 different schoolings, etc., how different would person A of me and person B of me be? It's actually very fascinating. So we have that dissemination amongst the ranks, mainly because of it's a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy, and each individual copy has had different experiences in different solar systems, some dealing with humans, some not. And it seems like the variants that have been off of Riker, or William Riker, version of Bob, they seem to be getting more dismissive about humanity, where in the first book there was a thing that Homer said, which was, if they don't care, they don't need to be a Bob, let's just go ahead and pull the plug and wipe them. Paraphrased, but that was the sentiment behind it. Now, not only do we have these things happening, but there's also a hacking issue that the Bobs are experiencing. Version 1 of Bob, he definitely got hit by something like that. There also seemed to be just this magical ability of this one group that's wanting to cause chaos to be able to pull things off. Poor Homer was the one that got hacked, and they were making him do things without him actually agreeing to do them, to cause things to blow up or for supply lines to not get to where they're supposed to get to, things that were causing a lot of problems for the new settlements that they were making. And then there's the Others. Ooh, the Others. The Others is a alien race. They're just bent on destroying everything. And I believe in the first book it was mentioned that they had gone into a system and there was nothing there. That there was planetary bodies, but there was no life. And in fact, it looked like life had been culled. I would like to say one of the saddest, but there was actually 3 quite sad things that happened to the various Bobs. One of them being that Bob, the original Bob, after creating Riker and Homer, etc., departs to go to Delta Eridani. And whenever he gets there, he finds the Deltans being attacked by gorilla-type things in the first book, right? Now, in the second book, he really shepherds and brings along the Deltans. He moves them from one side of their little continent to another across a mountainous spine and really hooks up with one of them that seems to be more advanced than the rest. Tries to teach them. And I think I said something about, should we? How much should we really get into it? How much should we, a developing type of a society, right? And in the second book, that really comes to fruition, and it must have been heartbreaking for that Bob, which is Bob 1, whenever that did happen, because it seems like every time that he tries to help, he's only interfering and making things just a little bit worse and having to do something bigger and bigger to continuously protect them. Well, whenever they get to where they're going, he was kind of daunted that there's more gorilla-type creatures there. That was one thing, but that was easy enough handled by every time they'd get close, he'd blow them out of the sky, as it were, blow them off the ground. With the Busters, he would just send them in. But then the hippogriffs that he named these creatures started coming in, and they were big, powerful, so he dropped a huge buster on their nest, not effectively wiping them out, but it's something that scared the elders. Then they didn't want anything more to do with Archimedes. Bob really has to back off and just become something that's in the background. Now, he does pop back in by disguising his drones on the trees, etc., and eventually comes up with a working mannequin type thing that looks like the Deltans. But of course, in the manufacturing process, he forgot about one thing, the sense of smell. That was kind of funny. But like I was just saying, it must have been really heartbreaking because he thought of Archimedes and Buster, Archimedes' kid, and the subsequent family that came from them as his family. Second thing that happened, then I was like, really? That sucks. Howard, which is a Bob, ends up getting really on with this Bridget person, and they end up making they're trying to go for Jameson, really. And they end up making something, and it becomes palatable, and actually start a business. Howard ends up having one of those moments where he does something that he regrets later on, because it seemed quite much that Howard was falling for Bridget in a big way. Even though technically he's disembodied, doesn't change the fact, like I was saying, he has feelings as a character in the book. He was highly invested and highly interested in her altogether. And then also he has this other person that's his best friend, that's a human, Stefan. And so he ends up introducing the two of them, and then they get married, which really busts Howard up pretty bad. Whenever they end up getting married, Howard takes off, but he does come back. It has to do with Bill. Bill ends up making a quadruped, awesomely named Bullwinkle, but also he was developing a bipedal so that Bob could interact with people again physically. And so he takes that prototype to the funeral for Stefan and gets his first hug in a very, very long time. Well, since he was turned into an AI before he was killed by Splat. The last one had to do with Homer. Because whenever Homer found out that he had been sabotaged, he suicided. He blew up as an entity, as a ship, ended it. The reason why he did that was, in his letter, he said that he felt that he was completely responsible, although he had no control. He couldn't get over it, and it damaged him mentally. He could not forget the problems that he had caused. He didn't like the idea whatsoever that he had no effect over what was happening through him. And then he ended his letter with, make that person pay. And Riker did it proper. Not only did he blow up the Vehement headquarters, he was talking to the Vehement leader, Vickers. And he's like, oh, no, you don't get this. You don't understand what I'm doing here. Yes, I am sending that to the corporate office to blow them up, but I've got you, because I'm also sending one your way too, so take that. And that was a great amount of revenge that got exacted for Homer and what happened to him by Riker. Now, as far as how many Bobs there are in the books now, quite honestly, I've lost track, because he can make 3 or 4 or 7 at any given time. For instance, I think there were 7 of them that were created to go to a place that it was thought that maybe the others might be, to test out new weaponry, drones, etc. And I think that all 7 of them got destroyed. But that doesn't change the fact it's actually a highly entertaining book in that way too, because it kind of keeps you on your toes. So as far as the others go, I believe it's Bill that is the one that is kind of heading things up quite a bit, but there are a lot of Bobs downed by the others. And there is a bit of an interesting back and forth in between the drones that they've created to send out and the missing Bobs. I'm pretty sure that the original 2 were actually destroyed by them, as was the Chinese probe as well, because of part of the conversation. But it seems like the others, their mentality is, there can never be enough of us. We're just going to strip everything that we can and just make our society bigger and bigger until there's nothing left. They don't care about the future. They don't care about anything but themselves and their prime, and that Bobs are food. Bobs are food. They actually tell Bob to stand to the side as they are coming at him with some of their ships to go to, I believe it was Delta Pavonis. As I said, they were coming at his little drone, and they're like, stand aside, food, after Bob had sent a sequence of prime numbers just to say, hey, look, I'm intelligent. Why don't you talk to me? But yeah, they were absolutely not interested whatsoever. And the thing that I hate the most for all the Bobs that have disappeared is, it seems like whenever one of his ships gets hit with the gamma rays that the others emit, that it causes instant failure through all the systems, and then they blow up. So there's absolutely no information really coming back to Bill, Howard, Riker, etc. about what could be done. But that doesn't stop the Bobs from having a moot and getting a plan together to deal with them. Yeah, I think that's where the next book is probably going to go. Speaking of Delta Pavonis, there was a new group of people that was discovered there. There's a group of people there known as the Pavs that get saved by one of the Bobs. And this Bob actually does a fairly remarkable thing. Instead of just kidnapping a bunch of them, which is essentially what 2 Bobs do, they actually kidnap them and then wake up 8 of them to find out, hey, what do you guys really want to do? Do you want to rebuild yourself, or do you want us to for you? I think that them giving the empowerment back to the Pavs to decide their own fate was where they had learned from original Bob with the Deltans. The others, it was probably where the 3rd book is going to go. There's a lot of detail. It might seem like I've given away a lot here, but I really haven't. With the creation of BobNet and them being able to hold moots where everybody gets together and discuss things, there's a lot of details that I have left out as well, and it will still be enjoyable to anybody that reads it. So Linus and Bob end up bringing Henry into the fold of BobNet. That has got to be a fun thing for Bob, all Bobs, because Bob, up till now, has, even though there's all kinds of creations of Bob throughout the book, there's different variances of Bob, and not one of them are the same as the other. To have another entity to interact with besides yourself in that VR, that's got to be a gift worth gold. I'm really glad to see that the Australian probe is finally starting to make some progress. I can't really say that I was absolutely terrified and worried for him, because it was almost like a comic relief character at first, but now I find myself getting a little bit invested in Henry, simply because he didn't have the same thought process or abilities at the onset because of his programming and the restrictions that weren't removed from Henry but was removed from Bob, so Bob could go through his own code and get things straightened out in the first book so that he could pretty well do what he wanted versus what they wanted him to do. And so I would really like to see Henry become a more prevalent character in the next 2 books. It would be really cool to see the back and forth in between the different mindsets of the different characters with him. And so that is it. You made it to the end. Congratulations. Thank you for hanging out with me in another video. Really appreciate it. And it is that time. One, I want to thank Dennis E. Taylor for writing these books. And then I want to thank you guys for subscribing and watching. As I mentioned previously, the next book we will do will be the 3rd one of this series, which is All These Worlds. So we'll see what happens in that one. My guess will be not made here, because I just want to find out. Since we've reached that moment, thank you for joining me. If you guys aren't a member of the family already, please hit that subscribe button and the bell, because we all need some more cowbell in our lives, quite apparently. If you guys happen to find a good book in between now and the next video, please do let me know about it, and we will check it out together. I'll be happy to read that with you. And as always, please leave me some comments down below, and I will read them, and I will respond to them. Beyond all that, I gotta get down the road. Have a great day. This has been Shane with Shane's Books in Review. I'll see you in the next video. And you guys, have a great weekend.